Yes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome at the first webinar series in the art of recruitment. And I'm super happy to have Lindsay Ross kick off our webinar series, where we've invited 10 experts in the recruitment industry to share one particular topic that they're absolute experts in. And I'm super happy that Lindsay today will kick our series off with Hypergrowth ON, how to build for rapid scale. Before I give the word to Lindsay, a couple of things to take into account. First of all, ask questions. This is an interactive session, even though Lindsay will be speaking, but ask questions in the chat. The most burning ones, I will just jump in and say, hey, Lindsay, don't go too fast. I know it's I know it's on hypergrowth, but hey, we really want to know what this is all about. And if not, we'll save the answers to the end of the conversation. This is your opportunity to talk to someone like Lindsay with many years of experience in recruitment, and especially with hypergrowth. So don't be shy. Ask any question that you might have. As well, share your LinkedIn contact details in the chat, so that other people can connect with you as well, and say hello and where you're from. Usually we have people from around the world dialing in, and we would love to hear where you're based, where you're from, where you work, and to make this as interactive as possible. After the keynote is done, we will share the recordings in the next few days. Then we have a small Christmas break, and then we start again in the new year. So let me formally introduce Lindsay. Lindsay currently is the CHRO at Bitpanda. She brings over 10 years of experience in creating people strategies for companies in hypergrowth. She's done startups, she's done multi-billion-dollar enterprises, and everything that's in between. She's been in the trenches, but now really is on the leadership side. So very strategic on how do you build and how do you plan for hypergrowth. Prior to joining Bitpanda, Lindsay had senior roles in companies like MessageBird and Adyen, and as well as Tommy Hilfiger and its holding company PVH. I've known Lindsay for probably over a year, and I really know her as someone that's extremely driven, highly energetic. She has tons of useful insights. And when I reached out to Lindsay and she said yes, that she wanted to do this presentation, I was super happy and honored to welcome her. So Lindsay, welcome. The floor is yours, and I leave it up to you.
Amazing. So good to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Now I'm going to do the techie thing and try and share my screen.
Yeah, exactly. Share your screen. I'll go out, but I'll be listening, of course, and give you the room to talk.
So I hope everybody can see this.
Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Great.
Perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk about the world of hypergrowth, and this has a big buzz and a bit of excitement and a lot of energy behind it. But at the throughout this whole sort of presentation, I'm hoping that we can actually talk about how we're going to slow down in order to scale. Okay, so first thing, what is the world of hypergrowth, right? If we look at Bitpanda, we are Europe's leading investment platform for digital assets. So we enable folks to trade anything from stocks to EFTs to crypto to digital assets. And the big thing, if you think about this, pre-COVID, we were around $1 billion in terms of our valuation. We had about 180 folks on the bus. We had one office location, and we were trading about 50 digital assets. As of today, we are over $4 billion in valuation. We are over 650 folks. We are over 10 offices and more coming down the pipeline. And we are currently over 1,020 digital assets. This is massive growth. So I often get asked the question, how do you scale like this in a good way? So the one thing I will say to everybody out here, don't panic, right? There's so much happening. Everybody is going to be wearing a million different hats. You've got a million different balls in the air. You've got to build. You've got to be strategic. You're kind of all over the place. And this is the fun part about it. So what I've tried to do with this whole sort of presentation is to break these down into some key points that I found really helpful in order to kind of think about how we're going to build for scale and scale the organization in a good, smart, effective way. So the point number one, when you land into a company that is going through hypergrowth, get context and take stock. And what I mean by this is take a moment. This is the one time when you first step into a gig like this that you have the opportunity to figure out the language, to figure out what's going on. What are the business drivers? What's the numbers? What is everybody speaking about, right? It is so easy for us to just jump in and start getting our hands dirty and build, but you'll never get this opportunity again. So my advice here, get the context. And also next to that, figure out where are you trying to go as an organization? What's the ambition? Okay. When you have this, you got to think, in order to get to where you want to go, point number 2, get clear on where you are. This is going to help you identify the gaps. So the first thing I always look at is the world of talent. Of course, as the people person, I want to understand the people. So the first thing when you think about your talent distribution, as a tech organization for us, the majority of our people should be in either tech, engineering, or product, right? And then we have our commercial area, which is second next to this, growth and enabling functions, staff functions, things like finance, legal, HR. And then of course, business operations, which is your customer support, and our world also payment operations, more those sort of heavy operational elements. When you look at the overall idea, what is your target distribution? And then where are you today? If suddenly you see in the enabling functions, you're at 25, 30%, you might want to go, we either aren't being efficient or we've not invested in the right areas. So how do we correct that? And that really shapes a huge part of your talent strategy. Point number 3, know your people. We always talk about it in the expression of who's on the bus. Now, here's my question to everybody. You've probably all seen this before. This is such an HR thing, right? We talk about the 9-box model, right? Potential, performance, where is everybody fitting? Well, guess what? The 1980s called and they want their tool back. This takes too much time. Nobody understands it. Nobody likes to do it. It's very complicated. Potential, especially for people, is really hard to understand. So what we suggest, simplify it. Keep it simple. Focus on the talent density. At the end of the day, when you're dealing with your line managers, they know who their A players are. They've got it. Figure out who are the A players, those rock stars, those potential future leaders. And also on the other side of this, figure out who are the questionable folk, maybe the misfits. And that could be people who are underperforming. It could be people who maybe don't fit from a cultural perspective. It could also be people that are just fundamentally in the right role, in the wrong role. And then what you have sort of in between is what we identify as core and core plus, right? So in the core, these are your steady eddies, right? These are people that are doing exactly what they need to do. But the question remains, can we grow them? And can they stay with us for 6+ months or more? And the core plus, these are also folk that you want to coach up and invest and get them into that A player spot. But the big thing to think about and the big thing for us to know is the A players and the questionables. And the other element, don't forget the criticals. We often hear from an HR side, we talk about critical players, and we talk about critical roles, 2 very different things. They're critical players. Everybody likes to be a critical player, but we forget critical players, and having them on the bus is actually a bad thing. And the reason why this is a bad thing is because it means the organization is dependent on 1 person or 10 people or whatever your distribution is. And now you have to figure out a way to get that knowledge and out of those people's heads and get it to somewhere else. You have to figure out how to hire other people in who can share the workload. There's a lot to do, but you need to remove the dependency. Next to that, you have the critical roles. And these are really tough in an organization to define, but these are the ones that should be fueled and filled by your A players. If they're so important to the organization, your A players better be in them. And this really fuels your succession planning, right? This is where you start. One of the things that we always think about too, and this is how when we start to think about who are our A players, who's the core plus, all of these different elements, is what makes people successful. And at Bitpanda, we have 3 key ingredients. This is what we call our people formula. So they're the Bitpanda fits. They get the how we work, right? The role models for the organization. They're also match winners. We move really, really fast. And in hypergrowth, you got to move fast. And so you need folks that think big, move fast, and make impact, right? No time for hand holding. You got to jump in the deep end and you got to run. Next to this is the brain power. We hire 8s, 9s, and 10s. That A players hire A players, and that's always raising the bar. So these are folks that we constantly try and keep a pulse on, and these are the folks that both we want to bring into the organization and continue to grow in the organization. Point number 4, build the red thread. Shape how you work together across cultures, countries, and time zones. And why? Because it is the foundation of your culture. Truly, it is the one thing that will unite everybody. So for us, we call it the Bitpanda DNA. This is really how we work together. There are 8 points. We've really stepped away, and consciously so, from those sort of ambiguous, ambitious value statements that everybody has a different interpretation of, that nobody's totally 100% clear what it means, into really tactical how you actually make decisions and how you work together. And these fuel your competencies against which you are measured from an impact perspective as an internal employee, and also competencies under which candidates are evaluated against. Do you like to work this way? Are you good at working this way? Because if so, this is the place for you. Point number 5, shape your way of operating. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. Welcome to COVID. We have been in COVID for a while, and COVID has fundamentally transformed the world of work, right? Everybody's expectations, how we work together, everything that we've been doing to navigate this global pandemic has been transformative. And so what we're seeing is that companies are adapting, and they are adapting fast. So hierarchy, structures, titles, bandings are being replaced by agility, dynamic, responsive, fast. Corporate ladders going from a manager to a senior manager, director, senior director, VP, SVP, EVP, chief doesn't exist anymore. It's much more interesting to zoom in and talk about freedom, responsibility, trust, and personal growth, because everybody's path is different. And primarily out of this whole COVID situation, the biggest element that's come out of this is flexibility, right? People want to be able to choose, where do they work? How do they work? What does this look like? How do I balance work and life? This is such a key component. And so no matter what organization you have a few choices to make. You can go to fully remote. You can do your own twist on a hybrid, or you can ask folks to return to office post-global pandemic. Whatever choice that you make, it's really, really important to remember it's an optimization game. There's pros and cons to both. But the big thing is to be really clear on why you're doing it, what the choice is that you're making, and communicate that out to your organization. What we're doing a 50-50 hybrid. So this means 50% of our employees' time can be at home and 50% can be in the office. We're going to give them 60 days work from abroad or work from anywhere. And we guide all of this by following what we call the 80-20 rule. This means 80% of their time needs to overlap with their team. And the rest of the 20%, we don't care. Need to go to the gym in the morning? Amazing. Start a little later. You have a lunch with somebody? Amazing. You got to pick up the kiddos in the afternoon? Perfect. Find that balance and create those clear agreements with your line managers and with your team. And what I would say for anybody going through this, make sure to remember these are guidelines. They're not hardline policies. You don't want to have to be in the position of being the police. That slows it down and it makes it clunky. And also it really gives HR that bad rap. Point number 6, once you have all of these different elements and you're super clear on who you are, how you work, what good talent looks like in your organization, and the organizational operation that you want, amplify it. Get the word out. Tell it and tell it authentically. And what I mean by authentically is there's that expression, don't put makeup on a pig, right? Don't try and gloss it up, because guess what? If we think about it, the world has also fundamentally shifted over the last 1, 2, 3, 10 years, right? We know we're not doing things the same way we always have done before. We know we're engaged 24/7. We also know that people really want to make a difference in the world. We talk about purpose, brand purpose. These are really important things that people want to be a part of. And we often care more about shared attitudes, values, and ways of life than age. And the fun thing is, we all like to give our individual spin to everything. These are the people that we have on the bus and the people that we're trying to get on the bus. But even more so, We are more informed than ever before. So those internal and external lines are completely blurred, right? Also, your brands are complete. There's no such thing as an employer brand and a consumer brand and an investor brand. They're all completely blurred. So when I say tell it authentically, I truly mean it. Own it. The good, the bad, warts and all, everything in between. Set the expectations, because this also serves as a filter. This serves as a filter for people who don't like working the way that you work, who don't like the organizational operations that you're building. And that's okay. This just might not be the right place for them, but they have that right to make that choice. And so that's why you just need to be radically clear about what they're signing up for and also what you're looking for. So now we're going to zoom in to the world of hiring, right? I could talk about the world of people all day long. So please ask me questions if there is anything burning. But as we think about FY22 coming down the pipeline, I think everybody has gone through that crazy end of year process where we start thinking about headcount planning. And this is the big thing in hypergrowth. How do you deal with so many people joining your organization? And from a TA side, how do you cope with this, right? How do you plan for this? So going back to my very first remark, you gotta slow down to speed up. It's not just about finding and hiring, right? We have to remember that. And this is something as people leaders within these crazy organizations that we have to make sure that the business understands, right? There's more than just talent acquisition, finding folks and being able to get them on the bus. There's a time demand. The business has a lot of interviews they're going to have to do. Are they ready for it? Are they capable of doing it? There's also the quality of hire question. It's not good enough to just constantly throw bodies at problems, right? You got to think about the quality of hire. This is always that bar, always that standard, right? It's always impact over effort. And how do you make sure that the organization, when it is under such pressure, continues to remember that bar? There's that operational impact. Once you hire 100 people, do they have contracts? Are you set up in the right location? Are they enrolled in payroll? Do we have enough hardware to ship them? Is our onboarding ready to absorb them? Can you run an onboarding training session for 50, 70, 100, 120 people? All these different things that we need to think about. Also workplaces. Do we have enough desks for folks if we are a hybrid or a return to office setup? So these different elements we have to think about. And also, more than anything, with those three elements, we have to consider the impact on the culture. If we fail at the first three, that's a huge hit to your high performance culture. Culture is the key. That is really your unique identifying element that's going to make your organization successful. And if we do a bad job on the first three, it's going to take the culture hit. So your ENPS, your candidate scores, your employee experience, everything kind of goes out the window. And then next to that, when you think about it, because the internal goes external and the external keeps it external, your employer brand's also going to suffer, right? So your reputation could take a hit if you don't do this well. So we need to make sure that we've got all our ducks in a row, everybody's super clear, and we got some clear agreements. The other thing that we always like to talk to the organization about is the fact that it takes time, right? It's the first pillar that I just mentioned, and it's not just on the HR side. I think a lot of our TA partners are probably getting hit on saying, hey, it's not fast enough, it's not this enough, it's not that enough. We get it. But there's at the same time, we have to realize that it's not just about what the TA team can do, but also what can the business absorb. If we look at just these numbers, and then you all know the funnel, but look at the numbers in green. If I wanted to hire 100 people, I got to start with over 2,000 candidates at the top of the funnel, right? And then you can see it going down based on the conversion rate every level. But out of every single one of these, to get to that 100 hires, the business, not HR, the business has to invest 1,335 hours, which would equate to 167 days or 33 weeks. Are they ready? Is the organization ready? It's a good question. So let's get really clear. This is my advice. Get really, really clear. Set your priorities because you cannot do it all. So again, we go back to step number 2 or point number 2. Where are we investing? What is the burning need within the organization? If you have overstaffed in enabling functions, that might not be the house that's on fire. Maybe it is the engineering, and that's the one you got to focus on. And so when you start setting the priorities as an organization, we have to look at this holistically and not just within our respective divisions, departments, or teams. And that's one of the challenges we have to keep discussing with the organization. Next to this, plan, and more plan. I think you guys have probably seen 1,000 Excel sheets. If you have systems like Workday where you can do strategic workforce planning, these are also great things. But either way, there's a few questions you need to take into consideration when you start thinking about your headcount plan. What do you actually need to achieve by end of the year? What's the big ask from the organization? And from a TA side, what resources do you need to actually make that happen? Next to that, how can you actually build these teams sustainably? If we think about it, we sometimes get requests for 30 folk, right? Let's just say from one team, I have 30 folk I need to get on the bus now, but I have 30 individual contributors and no manager in a brand new team. Well, that's not going to work, right? So you need to get the manager in and the ICs. There has to be a way to onboard these people, and the teams need to be set up in a sustainable way. And you also need to educate and keep in mind for yourself those realistic hiring times, right? There's the process that it takes, whether it's 60, 90, 120 days, depending on level, niche, skill set, seniority, all that kind of stuff. And there's also notice periods, right? So if somebody wants somebody right now to start in January, well, we should have started looking for that role back in like August, September. So these are educational moments and things we oftentimes forget. So it's good to make sure that we're tracking what is the realistic time to hire per role. And based on all of this information, prioritize. Where do we need to start first? And how do we prioritize the teams based on what the organization needs? And what we like to do is we like to highlight the top priors. We call it P1, P2, P3, P4, and we stack rank it. And I think what's really important here is sometimes if you say, hey, you've got 50 roles to hire in Q1, people go, well, what happens if I need more than that? What happens if you hit that number? Are you going to stop? We won't stop, right? We never stop. So what it means is that once one role is filled, the other is open. Another one is filled, the other one is open. And you keep that machine running. What we also notice, and I think this is an important thing, is the TA team itself, especially if you're building your own talent acquisition team, you have some other channels that you can leverage. And there's pros and cons to all of them. If we think about the internal hiring, right, your true internal TA team, you need to build a scalable team, right? And so this is where you might want to have your core team and some flexible either RPO or other sort of flex support on the side. Because the worst thing, and I think maybe some of us have done this before, experienced it before, is that when you start to scale your talent acquisition team, suddenly you hit hiring freeze, or maybe the hypergrowth is for a short period of time, or maybe it's just 1 year. And the worst thing to do is that you suddenly have to let people go. So scale your team in a smart way and use that external support for flexibility. You got to optimize your hiring processes. You got to train all your interviewers. You have to move to data, move away from guts. And you got to optimize your testing, right? So especially if you're in engineering, you want to do all these fun online tests. You need to increase your sourcing and location data. You got to go where the talent is, right? And as we are now moving more distributed, where is that? And we have to elevate and blast the employer brand. We talked about amplification. This is the moment. And we got to optimize our systems, which we'll talk about. But the big risk from a business standpoint is just sheer capacity and speed. Can you do this fast enough? Can you get your team up fast enough? And we all know the market is so hot. So next to this, you also have the channel of agencies. I would say create a preferred agency list, know who's going to what for who, and own the terms and conditions within the TA team, because you guys know better than everybody what good terms and conditions with agencies look like. Rope in your procurement teams. Absolutely, they're fierce negotiators, but you guys set that bar. The one thing about agencies from a business standpoint is they are expensive, and there is also still that time investment. Let's be fair. Somebody has to manage them. So if your team is strapped, can you give this back to the business? Then you have the opportunity for acqui-hire. This could either be done via acquiring an entire company solely for their talent, or being a bit sneaky and taking a leader in his team and pulling it into your organization. Also possible. With this, you need to work with your legal, with your finance, with your M&A, the whole crew to make sure that this works. And you need to also ensure that if you do an acquisition of a company, you've got some talent mobility happening on the other side, because you need to parachute somebody in from your organization into that new location to ensure the culture lives, eats, breathes, and scales. Because otherwise you're going to have a standalone organization that's going to continue to be standalone. One of the risks here, or a couple of the risks here, are quality, culture, the fact that the process can take a long time, and also it is quite expensive, but it's an option. The last part is really when you identify the gaps, and we need it now, and we can't hire fast enough, and the agencies aren't fast enough, and we can't acquire a company with the right skill set, this is when you can go outsource, right? So you've got your contractor process, you've got your provider list, and I would also be a bit sneaky and see if you can negotiate in the terms and conditions the ability to acquire even that talent that works really well with you on a permanent basis. And again, this is really some risks here. So some short-term skill set, you have the risk of potential knowledge loss. It's expensive. You're never 100% sure about quality. And there's also a cultural element, right? Because they're tied to another organization. But at the end of the day, you have 4 ways that you can fill the talent gap in hypergrowth. And I'm sure there's many more, but these are the ones that for us are the ones that we zoom in on. Point 8, build your team. So everybody's going to have a different take on what the world of talent acquisition looks like. And that's a good thing, right? Every organization needs its own twist. This is the current setup of our organization. We've got exec hiring team. We have our next gen team. We have our tech recruitment, which is product and engineering. We have everything under business recruitment. That's not product and engineering. So this is HR, this is growth, this is finance, this is legal, this is compliance, right? This is business operations like customer support and payment ops. And we also have our sourcing and location strategy team. So one from an acqui-hire perspective and a general talent mapping and data sourcing. And you guys can decide if you want to blend that or not. There's so many different ways that work out best. I like to remain fluid based on who we find and how we want to run. Next to that is, of course, the operation side of the house, tools, systems, processes, and your RCs. And then you've got kind of to the side the world of RPOs. So however you want to shape it, just make sure that you build your organization and you get those different focus areas so that you can run. Point number 9, optimize your processes. So everybody knows the hiring process. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but what I do want to talk about is the fact that for every single step, there's a hit. There's a hit on the business and there's a hit on the HR, right? And so there's on the business side, there's a lot of time and prioritization. They need to make sure that they're dedicated. You got to create some really clear SLAs with your organization. And on the HR side or the talent acquisition side, there's some things we have to build and get in place, right? Sourcing strategies, talent data, executive packages, right? Whatever that might be that you need to build, you got to build it because this is how this machine is going to run. And if we think about all those different elements, right? It's a time drain for both sides. But if you get them down first, then the process scales faster and you can run faster. One of the things I do want to call out that we find really effective is making sure that we have the kitchen sink debrief meetings. Again, removing sort of that single person making a decision within the organization. That also helps to safeguard the culture. And then anything from a leadership level, we also are building hiring committees, right? And so that makes sure that more than just one executive, whatever level that might be, also weighs in and that we're super comfortable with this person joining and leading our people. For high volume roles, this is a little different. We know this, right? This is much more about broadening your interview pool, getting people through. You can do this where you decide to source for 2 weeks, interview 1, source for 2 weeks, interview 1. Figure out whatever that right ratio is and how you want to do it, but make sure that there's a different process for the volume roles that is a bit broader, because that is going to help you cope with the hypergrowth. Point number 10, get your tech in order. Now, look at these different things. Everybody has a different preferred core HRIS system, and that's fine, right? Whatever it is that works for your organization, that's great. But all these different ingredients usually need to integrate with it. But specifically in the world of talent, you need to have a really strong ATS, right? ATS that facilitates process, that facilitates scorecards, that facilitates feedback, that lets the offer approval go fast and gets you data. And it also needs to tie really nicely in with LinkedIn, benchmarking tools, scheduling tools, You've got also live coding tests that need to fuel into this. You've got your CRM, and you also have your candidate feedback. So whatever this magic system is, and I have a few that I prefer, and so does my head of TA, but make sure that your tech stack is in order, because once you have it in place, again, life becomes a lot easier. And point number 11, be competitive. Welcome to the world of rewards. So what we always talk about, and it depends on where you are in your organization, right? I don't know if everybody can pay 100 in the 100th percentile of the market, or if they need to go at the 75th or at the 50th. So what we like to talk about is the world of total compensation. So if you look at these different ingredients, you have your base, you have your incentive bonuses, and you have your equity. But the other fun thing that we need to think about too is all the other stuff, like perks. Life happens. Your working model, for us, it's a hybrid. Your 80-20 rule, which allows even more flexibility. You got spot bonuses. And you also have retention grants and repurchase opportunities depending on where you are. These are good things. These are exciting things. And these are the selling points. The one thing I think as an HR team, people team, workplaces team, we need to make sure that this is really clear what we have, where we have it, and what we can offer. And we need to make it super competitive. One of the other elements, and this goes back to a little bit what I was saying previously about HR is sometimes positioned as like the policies and procedures police. And I'm really allergic to that. And so, especially for things like time off, the 80-20 rule, 50-50, these are guidelines, right? Life happens is our overarching mantra. This is one of the things that for us really differentiates. And actually, we had it at MessageBird, which I also found really, really powerful. And the reason why we talk about it is because everybody's life circumstances are different. Everybody has different needs and different wants. So your benefits packages, flex bin. Your life happens moments. If you face one of those inevitable challenges in your life and something happens, 2 days bereavement leave might not cut it, especially if you're a foreign national hanging out in Europe, right? So be flexible and stop positioning the world of policies and procedures and really, really rigid stuff. The big thing too, we always talk about create the path, don't follow it. Right? And this can be from an L&D perspective. This can be from an impact perspective, because in hypergrowth organizations, it is about impact. But the whole point is you don't have time to handhold, and your organization doesn't have time to handhold. And so people need to be able to create their own path, right? So we also pay people for creating their own path, AKA making that impact. So when you start thinking about your world of rewards, figure out what your pay philosophy is. For us, it is pay for impact. The more impact a panda makes, the more they're compensated. So again, yes, of course, we have guardrails, we have understandings of what's competitive and what's out in the market. But if somebody knocks it out of the park, keep going and be rewarded as such. That's how you keep people on the bus. Point number 12, kill the ghosts, especially my TA partners, because you'll have a ton of pressure. Why is this not moving fast enough? Why is the top of funnel not good enough? Why am I not getting enough interviews? What is happening, right? And it's really, really important to over communicate. More than anything, you think you're communicating enough, but you never, ever are. So over communicate. Make sure you have those weekly moments with your line managers. Make sure you're sending reports out. Make sure you're touching base and that people understand what is happening and where you are. And if you think you're doing it and you're doing it well and you're doing it often enough, it's a good moment to ask for that feedback, right? Do they need more from you? Do they need less from you? Whatever that is, just make sure those lines of communication are super open. And guess what we're going to be communicating? Numbers. Be about the numbers. So, snapshot. This is a quarterly scorecard snapshot. This is how we manage our stakeholders. We talk about people in terms of money. We talk about people in terms of effectiveness. And we also talk about people in terms of sustainability. These are the different elements that make up a really strong organization. And underneath that are always OKRs or KPIs or whatever target program that you want to use that drive these forward. But these let us as an organization constantly have a pulse on how we're doing. And as a people team, as a TA team, we can zoom in on areas that might be not as effective, that might be struggling. We can figure out what is going well, where do we need to take some corrective action, and we can run. But it also lets it be really clear to the organization just how things are actually tracking. And so when we really want to deal with our line managers, these are some of the snapshots that you should be talking about in those weekly meetings, right? How many headcount is open, right? How many roles are open? What are the number of roles filled? How many openings are by recruiter? I mean, again, ideally you have recruiters with about 15-ish roles. I can say currently in my team, I have some folks that are, goodness, way above in the 30s. That's not going to work, right? But it's really good to highlight. We also have funnel activity and conversions. They like to know where people are in the stages. And we also have the status, right, of our offers. How many have we made? How many have accepted? Who's rejected? Why have they rejected? All that kind of good stuff. And specifically on the reasons for rejected, this gives us an opportunity to look back at all the stuff that we've been talking about, from compensation to culture to anything, the experience that we've shaped, to see if there's any room for improvement, if there's anything else that we could do. Are we seeing any threads coming through here? So this is why these numbers on a weekly basis per role are so, so, so important. And then my overall advice and how we cope with it, you got to keep building the plane while flying it. There's really not much else we can do because we're skyrocketing. Just remember, you guys are on a plane and you're building it, and that's okay. That's fun. That's part of the journey. And that's the world of hypergrowth. So Adyen, I think it's back to you.
Yeah, Lindsay. Awesome presentation. So many nuggets in terms of wisdom. We got a couple people in the chat. So for the questions, one question came from Maggie. She said at the beginning, the distinction between critical players and critical roles. The challenge with critical players is they're often aware of that fact and tend to get into protection of their territory, unwilling to share knowledge and become less critical to the business, for example. How do you find and how do you mention that?
So I think a couple of things. Usually we try not to share too much in terms of labels. We don't like to label people in our organization. But if somebody innately knows that they are just, maybe they've been here from inception and they've just got that knowledge, it's a hard thing to suddenly realize you do have to pass it down. So one is you got to go in this with empathy. But at the other point, there is just that really clear conversation. Hey, guys, we need to get this out of your head. It's all up there. We can't. What if you win the lottery tomorrow? Then what? It's just really about having that authentic conversation and seeing what is the blocker. And then you can figure out how to overcome it. And I know that sounds a bit fluffy, but it really would depend on the context. But I like to kind of just have straight talk. That's how I sort of approach it.
Okay. Second question that came from the audience: hypergrowth and quality of hire. Like, how do you balance the two, right? And especially every organization says we want the best. You also said 8, 9s, and 10s, but still you have this massive volume of hires. So how on earth do you keep the quality of hires?
Oh gosh, this is the big thing, right? Because everybody panics and they go, I need people now. And I literally have heard hiring manager goes, yeah, but this is the best I've seen. No. Right. And so this is where, as a team, we need to make sure that foundation is in place from literally the machine. Everybody needs to know how to interview, and the feedback needs to be in your ATS so that everybody sees it and you can make sound decisions. And then you take away the decision-making from one person. That is the kitchen sink debriefs. And that makes sure that people give a consensus on the go, no go. And then you can also implement things like bar raiser programs. And for specifically on leadership roles, you can actually parachute in an exec and a bar raiser. And so this makes sure you have those constant pulses across the org. I really think one of the things we need to realize is we won't always get it 100%. Some people will slip through, and that's okay. But we need to make the organization aware of it. Because at the end of the day, they're going to have to deal with the mess anyways.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. For the people unfamiliar, what do you mean with bar raiser?
Ooh, Amazon's bar raiser. I think, and also Uber has done an incredible spin on it. And so basically these are people that can be from outside of the function. They can be other executives, and they're really trained interviewers that look at, is this person going to come in and raise the bar? And they have really cool ways of doing it. And I suggest everybody zoom in on it and also try and shape it to your organization. We're in the midst of doing it now, but I think this just makes sure that there's that extra hard check.
Yeah. In terms of your ATS, you were very deliberate saying like everyone has their own preference. Of course, a question from the audience came. So which one do you guys use? What's your preference?
Okay. So I will tell you honestly, I am 100% a greenhouse girl. Greenhouse is my jam. I got to tell you, we've used other ones, but it's the reporting is so wonderful. And the structure, this is my favorite. And yeah. What else can I say?
Awesome. Very clear answer. In terms of you've worked at different organizations, right? I understand the framework. Tell me a little bit more if this framework, you come in and it's basically the same trick all over, or every organization is very different compared to the roles that you had, for example, with Adyen and MessageBird and now with Bitpanda.
I think what's funny is every organization likes to think they're different. And it feels different, right? Because of course, it's your own personal journey that you're going through. But at the end of the day, you're still dealing with an organization and you're still dealing with people. And so, yes, there's probably some twists and turns a little bit in there, but innately it's pretty consistent. Yeah.
And did you come in the same kind of phase where the company was at, or do you see that different, tools, different methods, different solutions come with every stage to that extent?
It definitely comes in phases, right? So you're definitely a bit scrappy if you're smaller and how that looks, because it's easier. You know everybody who's on the bus right away, so you don't have to do as much on the upside, on the front side. I think as you come in, so I joined Bitpanda and it was about 400 people or so when I joined, and this is maybe at that sort of medium stage where you can't know everybody, but a lot of people know everybody, and so you still have to start. So I think when you really get to that mid-size, that's when it's pretty consistent. It's the scrappy phase at the beginning. That's a little twist.
Yeah. In terms of killing the ghost, right? Over communicate. How do you do that?
Oh, numbers. The business like numbers. I know I keep saying this, but it's really true. You got to talk their language and you have to be proactive, right? Make sure you get time in those agendas. Make sure you're sending those reports. Make sure you're making contact with them, Slack them, whatever it is that you communicate, but make sure that they know that you're there and that you have a constant pulse on their organization. It calms it down. And also when you go through those weekly meetings with them, you can also say, hey, this is going super, super well. And this is some areas that we're struggling with. How can we partner together to fix? This is what we're seeing. And they're in the process with you. It's a great thing. And it builds a sense of trust.
Yeah. And in terms of your internal team, right? Because that's on the business side, that's the leadership team. So how do you do that with your own internal team where constantly people are running into, unknown territories, high volume needs, maybe frustration even? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that is actually, sometimes we almost get so focused on the business. That's true. Again, so in our world, the people leadership team, for instance, each of the leaders within my team have daily and or weekly stand-ups with their teams. So they're always pulse checking, making sure everyone's good. We have a big people in workplaces team meeting every Friday so that everybody knows what's going on in the organization. And I think the one thing we need to remember is this is still work, right? And this is fun. This is what we love. It's a good thing, but it's also nice to have those social moments. So like take a break, take a pause, have a drink at the end of the day, whatever, and you'll see how that also makes people feel and calm down.
Yeah. So especially now in this market, there are a lot of companies in hypergrowth, right? And a lot of companies saying, we raised so many $1 million and we're valued at this, and you're going to build the future to that extent. How do you use your employer branding as your competitive advantage?
Oh, so guys, you have to wait because ours will officially launch in the new year, the whole thing. And I'm so excited about it because our employer brand marketing team has done an amazing job.
Yeah.
But we are being really authentic. Even in the language, there's like no holds back. And I think what I said before is that's why it's different. It's not so much an employer brand. In fact, I've decided I don't like that word anymore. I'm just going to call it the people brand because this really is just about everybody and how we deal with it. Yeah.
Awesome. So when is it going to be out? When should we be checking your LinkedIn, Lindsay?
I will share, but we're talking about within, the beginning of the new year, January. So keep watching. It's coming.
Yeah. There was one particular question. Let me see. Let me get it up. There was a question when you shared something about hybrid and location. Someone asked, do you mean relocation? And do you guys do relocation, or do you have a specific agency helping you out with relocation of talent?
Yeah. So I think this is a fun one. We have both because we need both. So we've hired an amazing head of talent mobility, right? And this is also not just candidates coming in, but folks moving around, I think is another thing we need to consider. And she is currently building her team. And at the same time, we also have agencies because, like I said, you kind of need to fill the gaps. So we got both right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, for you, Lindsay, because it all sounds amazing, right? Like, okay, we need to hire so many people. We got these budgets. We got these targets going. We got the hiring funnel. Basically, two questions. How do you get your hiring managers to commit to so much interviewing where they have their own priorities as well? Like, I mean, they understand it's important to get their team up, but they got their priorities of the product that they need to launch, about, the employer branding that needs to be out, whatever their project might be in their work. So how do you deal with that?
My overarching message to the business: it is your job to build your teams. We're here to help, and we're here to support and to partner with you. If it's not a priority for you, we got enough to do. Then we will shift priorities and we will do something else. And that's really a message. And again, going back to those clear agreements, if they want it and they want it now, they have to commit. If they can't commit, then we can't either. We're not going to sit there and chase them. If it's not important to them, it's not important to us.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Question from Dima. In terms of the first steps in diversity, right? Where do you start? How do you get more cultural diverse people in? And how do you make the business aware of that? I understand it's a big topic. A lot of people deal with it. But again, in hypergrowth, right, we need people. Like, if sometimes if you only say, like, we need diversity, and it actually might hamper the growth, So how do you start with it, and how do you embed that in your organization?
Yeah, it is a tough one. And that is a good question. I think, I've been personally lucky that when you come into sort of the European landscape, it's immediately very, very diverse. So when I joined Bitpanda, we already had 45, almost 50 nationalities, for instance. Yeah. And it also depends on what your definition of diversity is. For us, this is really like beyond all identifiers. But I would say the following. I think you have to think about it in what we would call sort of three categories. You have that equal chance or equal opportunity, right? And so how do you make sure that every step of the way that you can remove barriers to people joining? That could be through unconscious bias training when they're going through the interview process. It could be introducing panels when you're going through the interview process. It could be running your job descriptions through a language decoder, right? Because we know certain nationalities and also females do not do well if there's a whole list and they don't tick every box. So they won't apply. So there's some of those things. Also, when you think about growing in your organization, right? So how do you remove the barriers to people growing? Then you have the world of equal pay. And this is to make sure that you same impact, same role, same pay, right? Fair and transparent. And the last one is the life happens, because this gives us, again, the flexibility to make sure that we welcome everybody and we tailor to those individuals. Everybody is an individual with different circumstances. Yeah. Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that, Lindsay. And then this one, it's a little bit broad, but there are definitely some sources as well, and also like some recruiters on the calls. Like, so how many people do you need to hire 100 people within? Is it one person? Do you have like a whole bunch of people like responsible for that, or what do you see? What do you see there in terms of your team? In terms of my team, I think right now, if I were to tag, I would say we got 3 people on 100 roles. 3 people on 100 roles. 3 people on 100 roles from a recruiter standpoint, which, guys, that is not workable. So this is where my poor head of TA, Barbara, needs to build the team. So we are building the team. Yeah. All right, Lindsay, I'll give you the floor. This is unprecedented. We've never done it. But why should people join Bitpanda and your team? What's so special about joining you guys? And do you guys have any openings for maybe some of the people that we have here? First of all, we have a ton of openings. Yeah. We are going through massive scale. So the scale you saw at the beginning, let's just say it's going to be a lot bigger over the next year plus. But I would actually say, people often ask me why I joined. Maybe maybe I'll tell this authentically.
Yeah.
I love founder-led organizations. I love dealing with founders. They're quirky and they're awesome and they're amazing. But there's also this moment when you deal with founders that can you let the baby grow up? That's always the question. And how much freedom can you have? And next to that is also, do they love the people organization? Because HR itself can be the most loved or most hated organization. And sometimes it wears both hats. But really, when I met our two founders, so Paul and Eric, they closed the deal for me. And the reason why is because they are folks, and this is the way that the organization operates, is they want to bring in really smart people and let them do what they do best and run. And that, I know people talk about it, but I can honestly say authentically, that was the situation for me. And that's also the situation we're creating for our teams. And so we do want a lot of really great, smart people to get on the bus and figure this out with us and run. So sign up. It's amazing.
Amazing. And I think a couple of your colleagues also joined your talk. So Barbara's here and Carolina. So great job there. Great job there, guys. Lindsay, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn the best way to connect with you?
100%. And I do have to apologize because I am behind on my LinkedIn, but yes, LinkedIn for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I promise to catch up.
There's one final closing question that I have for you. So for you as a person, Lindsay, right? How do you stay sane in a hypergrowth model? Because you can work 24/7 and still the work won't be done. Like every time that I interact with you, you're always smiling, high energy, and you seem to be in complete charge. So what have you learned personally, through these years on how to deal with the stress and how to deal with the volume and still have time to do a webinar like this, for example?
Yeah, I think I genuinely love what I do. And I really love the people I get to do it with. So that makes it already fun. But you do have to consciously make that time because especially now where literally the home and life have blurred, you physically need to get up and move and shut the door and walk away. And I think the good news is you have to make that concerted effort, but you can, because at the end of the day, it won't stop. And that's something you have to realize. There's always going to be something, especially in this context, and you can't fix it all. And you do need to recharge. It's so important to recharge in hypergrowth.
How do you do that?
Oh, I have the world's cutest dog. So I'm forced to leave my house, which is good.
Yeah.
And I've got an incredible husband that also likes to pull me out and tell me, you got to step away. But I think really from how I enjoy it is I do things that I really love to do. Going to restaurants when they're open, having a glass of wine, and just really making sure I take that time. And I have to say also my team's really good at making me do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay, 2 more practical questions. One, is it okay? Someone asked to share that they've attended this webinar on LinkedIn and tag you into it.
Of course.
Exactly. I just wanted to hear you say it, but of course that's possible. We love to share knowledge and share with as many people as possible. Would you be open to share your presentation that we can send with the recordings, or is that Lindsay like are you comfortable with that we share the presentation?
I believe so. I'll do one more quick sense check to make sure I didn't do anything goofy in there, and then make sure you can have it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I cannot thank you well enough. You were awesome as our first speaker. Super happy to have you. For our audience, guys, this was the first session. We're going to have a Christmas break, and then on the 8th of January, we're going to continue our series with Tamar van Herk, who is the head of tech recruitment at Molly, also going through hypergrowth. She has a different angle of looking at hypergrowth, what she experienced, also like very hands-on. So that's going to be a very cool presentation as well. Also a little bit more on the future of work and some of the decisions that they've made with the team at Molly. Lindsay, once again, thank you so much, and have an amazing Christmas break, and everyone else as well. And we'll see each other in the next year. Bye, guys.